The sacred is revealed in the ordinary. There is a beauty in this. But how do we discover the mystery of the sacred in our seemingly mundane existence? Welcome to Revealed, a podcast sponsored by Resurrection Catholic Parish in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Let's join our hosts, Katie McAllister and Tony Pickler, as they explore the lives of people, organizations, and resources that will help us delve into the sacredness of the ordinary.
Welcome to Revealed. We're back where we are looking for the sacred in the holy in our ordinary lives. I'm Katie.
And I'm Tony.
And we are excited to be here back. We had a little bit of a little hiatus there for a little bit, didn't we, Tony?
It almost seems like we went on summer vacation.
We kind of did.
And yet we didn't.
And we didn't. But you know what? We're back and we have a great guest in the booth with us. And we are so excited for you to hear what he has to say. So, Tony, why don't you introduce our guest for us?
Well, I couldn't think of a better guest to get us rolling again this fall and into this, I guess, new season of Revealed. And our guest today is George Hartmann. George was a longtime executive at Fort Howard Paper Company and has contributed to this community in so many different ways, including our own parish here at Resurrection. So, George, we're so happy to have you aboard here on this podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, George, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are? What is your biography? How did you get to this point in life?
Well, I was born and raised in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, and graduated from high school there. I was one of 7 children. My dad was a barber in Elmhurst, and my mother was a nurse. So that was always fun. And I went to Marquette University to start with. And I had an offer to come up there to play football and to earn a scholarship, which I did in my freshman year between September and December of 1960. And they offered me a scholarship, but they proceeded to tell me they were dropping football.
I was going to say that was back when Marquette had football for a time.
That was in 1960. Right. So anyway, I went from there. A bunch of coaches came in from all over the country. I had a school picked out, Drake University in Des Moines. I had been offered a scholarship there. I came home. I told my mother I'm going to Drake. My mother said, "No, you're going to St. Norbert." I said, "What is St. Norbert?" I knew nothing about it. She had a friend who had a son who graduated from St. Norbert, and they had a very good experience. So anyway, that's how I got here.
What position did you play?
I played defensive tackle.
Oh, right.
Yes. And I played in 61, 62, and I got hurt in 63. The fall of 63, and then, of course, I graduated in 64. So that's how I got to where I am. And then that changed my whole life because I came up here to go to school. I met my bride-to-be, Sharon Beeble at that time, and we were married a year after I graduated. And we moved 8 times, lived all over the country for the first 10 years of our marriage, and then settled here in 1974. So,
any children?
We have 3 children. We have a daughter in Nashville, Tennessee, who's in the teaching business, followed her mother, and she's actually in administration now. I have a daughter in business in Minneapolis for business incentives, and our son is here in Green Bay, and he's an emergency medicine physician. Yes. So.
Well, George, I read about you in a book by Phil Hawk entitled The Golden Age, and it was really looking at 6 different companies who started small and kind of humble roots and then grew and talked about the people who made those companies. And you were talked about in the Fort Howard story. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your involvement at Fort Howard and how that evolved over the years? Not just the company, because I know that evolved too, but also your career there.
Yeah, I actually came to Green Bay in 1974 to work for a fellow by the name of Jack Brorin, who I had worked with at American Can. He was here. He was the president of Bay West Paper Company. So I came to town to work to replace him as vice president of marketing and sales for Bay West Paper Company. Jack and I went to the board several times over the years asking for capital investment to grow our business because we were growing the business, and but we were buying a lot of stuff instead of producing it internally. And the board never thought the tissue business was something they wanted to get into. So about that time, I was approached by Paul Sherrill, who was the CEO of Fort Howard, to come to work for Fort Howard. And of course, not having to move and being in the same town, although that was a very difficult decision because Fort Howard was the arch enemy of Bay West. At least that's how we saw it. But it's interesting. I did go to work there, and my career, I started in sales and marketing and ultimately got into general management toward the last 4 or 5 years of my career. I was president of the North American commercial business for Georgia Pacific Corporation. We had been purchased twice, which is in and of itself kind of an interesting story. But the whole theory was my mother was a big person who said, use your daily activities. Everything you do during the day, you should offer up. And that should be your driving force. And it was interesting when I got married, Sharon felt very similarly. It was very, very interesting how my mother and my sweetheart ended up thinking the same way. But that's really what drove me a lot during some of the difficult times, as we all have, and some of the good times as well. So anyway, I tried to think about that periodically when I was just doing regular, non-religious kinds of activity. That was what was being offered up, or that was what was being done to honor the Lord. That's basically what we were doing. So,
and Fort Howard became the largest paper company in the world, right?
It did. We were the largest tissue company. We were acquired in 1997 by James River, and subsequently changed the name to Fort James. Moved our headquarters to Chicago. So we bought a townhouse in Chicago, kept our main house here, and I worked around down there during the weekend, would come home on the weekend. Then 3 years later, in 2000, Georgia Pacific bought Fort James. And what was good for me was I was the only executive from Fort Howard that was asked to continue in my current role. And that's unusual for a company that's been acquired. Typically, when you're acquired, they bring in, they put their own people in the business. But we had such a strong market share at Fort Howard in the business that we were in that they wanted me to continue to do that. So I ran the business for Fort Howard, Fort James, and GP in the last few years of my career. And I worked in Atlanta after GP bought us. I worked a year there, and they would fly me down on Mondays and fly me back on Thursday night, and it was very nice. They treated me very well.
Wow, you made quite a difference in that company.
Yeah.
So my dad always says, nobody would know Green Bay if it wasn't for toilet paper and the Packers. And you actually are involved in both of those.
Yeah,
The Packers, you were on the board of directors, right?
That's correct.
So can you tell us about that? How did you get involved?
I guess because Georgia Pacific at that time was the largest employer in the city of Green Bay. And at that time I was president of the business. So they asked me to be on the board of the Packers. And it was very interesting because the work that the Packers do in the community is related to the amount of time and effort that is put in. The Packers are a very strong organization and a very good organization, and care a lot about the community and do a lot with the community. But the work of managing the Packers is done at the committee level. And I served on the sales and marketing committee and on the compensation committee, which was kind of interesting. But that's the role I played. And I was active on the board for 7 years. And you have to retire when you're 70, as Mark Murphy is finding out, because he's going to retire next July. But I still go to all the board meetings. I still invited to we're having, for example, the board dinner tonight. The annual board dinner is tonight, and I'm invited to that. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Any great memories that just really...
Well, the big thing was hiring Mark Murphy. That was a huge effort. And there was a group within the Packer organization at that time, a group on the board that wanted a local person to be. They felt like if we didn't put a local person in, the Packers were in jeopardy of staying in Green Bay. And that was a legitimate thought. It was fortunately not the majority opinion of the board, and so we voted that down. But and we hired Korn Ferry, and they did a search, and they called Mark Murphy, who was the athletic director at Northwestern at that time, And they asked Mark if he would be interested. And Mark said, gee, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, so he came up, and of course, it's history now what's happened.
Well, if the
And
Packers come knocking, you answer. I mean,
right. We just recently announced that Ed Policy will be the successor to Mark Murphy. So, and he's been with the Packers for 12 years. So it's a good thing.
That's a great choice. And I was wondering, what was your first year on the board of directors? So kind of getting what's your era of leadership with the Packers?
Let's see. I think around 2003, Tony, is when I started, and I ended about 2010, something like that.
So you did get to be part of that last Super Bowl or the latest
Super Bowl.
I
did. I have
it's not the last one.
I got a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah.
Interesting story about the Super Bowl ring. Just a quick side note. The board of directors voted that all employees of the corporation of the Packers should get a Super Bowl ring, which was wonderful. The problem is, in January of the following year, everybody got a 1099 for $35,000. Wow. And some of these folks were administrative people making $35,000 a year. That was a big problem. So we re-voted to gross up and pay the taxes for all those people, because what we were worried about was people selling their rings to get the money in order to pay the taxes on what was a gift. So that was an interesting,
what a story. Wow. Yeah. I mean, the Packers have been so generous in so many ways,
right, exactly.
With the Packer Foundation. But there's another example.
One of the things I was on the community foundation board of the Packers, that committee, at one point in my career on the board, and we would go visit every single charity that would request a contribution from the Packers. We would physically go there. So I went up to Superior, and some places that were, holes in the wall. Yeah. And I remember one place that was a female abuse prevention place. It was only about 3 or 4 people, but they did a great job, and we gave them, and they couldn't believe that somebody from the Packer board was knocking on their door in Superior, Wisconsin. So
that's an amazing
unfortunately
story.
We don't do that anymore because it's just growing to be so big that you can't do it. So we do a lot of that by phone.
I was going to say, I know being a recipient whatsoever you do, I know the phone calls still get made, good. For sure. Awesome. Absolutely. Good. How else? I know you've been such a big community supporter and contributor. So are there other organizations you've been involved with besides the Packers?
There are, Tony. I've been very involved with the Salvation Army. Very, very frustrating organization, but a very great organization. When I think about the work that they do, is wonderful. They serve a tremendous amount of people. I've been involved with the Boys and Girls Club. I used to go play pool with the kids on Oneida Street on the Boys and Girls Club place there at noon, because the kids would be there, and I'd go play pool with them during my lunch hour. So I always enjoyed that. But yeah, those are two of the organizations. The New Community Shelter has always been in fact, I'm involved in that right now, but that's always been a favorite for Sharon and for myself. They help the homeless, as you're well aware of in that particular point of view. And I'm very involved at St. Norbert College. I'm on the board of trustees there, and have been for many years, and do a lot of work there.
What drives you to do that? I mean, you could be sitting at home and in luxury and, living life, but why do you get involved with these
Because I think that they're good people that are really doing good things for the community. They're really helping people. And so I do my little part to try to help that process along and contribute what I can. So
I get a feeling you don't put your feet up a whole lot.
No, I don't.
Pretty busy.
No, that's true.
George, I know that you visit local assisted living centers, nursing homes to bring communion and to make pastoral visits. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
what
it's very interesting, Tony. Thank you for asking that. I do the, I can't think of the name of the memory care place on Hoffman Road.
Courtyard?
The Courtyard. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. The Courtyard, I take communion to once a month, do a prayer service and a communion service there. And it's kind of funny, the people there are really struggling. And they sit around and you don't think that they're paying much attention. But I always start with a song. And I start with like Amazing Grace or or one of those songs. And I mean, it's amazing how they perk up and they are mouthing the words. So that's been a very rewarding experience. And, people are amazed. It's amazing how much they appreciate receiving Holy Communion. That's so special to them. And then I do the hospital once a month also, Aurora Hospital. And we go around, and after we check with the nurses to make sure the people can receive communion, I distribute communion to them. And I've had some interesting experiences, like people wanting to go to confession, and I have to say no.
You haven't done that. Huh?
That's above my pay grade.
That's so cool. That's awesome.
Oh, well, I'm going to change direction a little
Sure.
bit here. You mentioned your sweetheart,
Yes.
Sharon, and I have a little bit of a similarity with Sharon. I also taught at Resurrection Catholic School, and when I came in, they always talked about Sharon Hartmann and what a force she was, and just a great teacher. But unfortunately, you've lost her, right? She's so how has that been? Going.
Well, we had 57 years together, Katie, and it was a wonderful relationship. I was very, very privileged to be involved in that. She was a very, very good person and loved the kids. Absolutely loved those kids like she did her own children.
Mm-hmm.
And she treated them that way. And the kids know. They can feel, as you know, as a former teacher, they know when when you really mean it, when you're saying it. And she had that feel, and it was amazing. We'd be walking around downtown, and some big burly guy would come up and say, "Mrs. Hartmann," give her a big hug. I said, "What?" She said, "Oh, that was my fourth grader," because she taught fourth grade for 20 years. So anyway, they don't forget. So, but yeah, she was quite a lady. We had a great life, 57 years together, and yeah. I mean, sooner or later we all have to go.
Yes, we do.
Too early for her.
Yeah, I know. But she's still with you. She's still in your heart.
Of course.
That's beautiful. So, point of this podcast is really looking for the sacred in your ordinary life.
Right.
Where do you see God in your daily life? Where do you see the sacred?
Yeah, I see him in everything I do, Katie. I think I try to. I can't say I always do that, but I try to. I think it's important. Formal prayer is very important, and I do that. I do that at night. I do that, obviously, when I go to church. But I think just offering your daily services, the things that you do on a regular basis, offering them up as a prayer to the Lord is a good way to do it. And that came from my mother, I said earlier, and from Sharon as well. And that's what we tried to do, and that's what we do. So.
Well, George, you have been an amazing guest. You've been an amazing contributor to this community, the wider community, the Packers, the Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army, New Community Shelter, all of those places you've been involved, but also Resurrection Parish. You've been such a great member of this parish, so involved, touched so many lives in so many ways. And so thank you so much for being the guest here on Revealed. And I just wish you all the blessings in the world as you go forward.
Tony. Thank you, Tony and Katie, for doing what you do. And you guys have been a great asset to our community. So thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. And we thank you for listening to Revealed. And until next time,
keep looking for the sacred in the ordinary.